Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Get connected, Fitchburg. Sign up for Fitchburg Connect, the city's monthly e-newsletter that keeps you informed about all the events, services, and updates that matter to you. Get it in your inbox once a month. Sign up today to get Fitchburg Connect.
Committee of the Whole on April 22nd, 2026 at 6:31 p.m. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is roll call. Administrator Brecklin, will you help us?
I will absolutely assist with this task. Mayor Aradafrada.
Here.
Alder Dantzler Jr.
Here.
Alder Gerhardt.
Here.
Alder Herbst.
Here.
Alder Jetzer.
Here.
Alder Latisse.
Here.
Alder Lepper.
Here.
Alder Maldonado is absent with excuse. Alder Reichstedt.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Next is the approval of minutes. I'll need a motion on the draft minutes of the March 25th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting.
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Second.
And seconded by Alder Latisse. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
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 Alder Gerhardt, I did not catch which of the two alders here made
Donald.
that. I thought that was the case.
Donald was the
Yep.
first.
Perfect, thank you.
Motion, any opposed? Motion carries. Next is public appearances for non-agenda items. We have nobody in chambers and nobody online for non-agenda items, so we'll move on to item 6, agenda items. Our first agenda item is council orientation and onboarding, and this is with our administrator, Chad Brecklin, and our city attorney, Valerie Zisman. Chad, I'll turn it over to you to start.
Yeah, so we have our annual council onboarding and orientation. As I mentioned last night, I know that some of you, really all of you have seen this before at some point in time. Both of us will try to make this as efficient as possible while still reviewing the material that is definitely important each and every year. So if you have questions, you'll certainly be able to let us know, and Valerie's going to go first this morning or this evening.
Good evening, and thank you. Recognizing that most of you, or all of you, have seen, at least in some shape or form, this presentation for me, some of you probably more time than you wish you had. I will apologize in advance if your eyes gloss over. I'll try to keep it brief. Understanding this is a fairly complex area of the law, and so really the purpose of tonight's orientation, like every year, is really just to either introduce you to, or more likely to remind you of, kind of flagging the issues that you might be running into so that they're on your radar. From there, you know when to ask for help. So understanding that, I'd like to, again, reiterate that my role as city attorney is to provide you as a part of the city with legal advice as it relates to the city. I can't provide you with personal legal advice, so if you need help in a divorce or in buying a house or anything else like that, I'm sorry, I can't assist you there. But if you have any questions ever with regard to your role as an alder or city functions, always happy to help. And I, again, want to remind you, probably all of you know this, but just as a reminder, I am here to provide you with advice. It is not my role to do enforcement of these rules. That's done by the DA or the Attorney General. So I say that for two reasons. First of all, if you ever feel frustrated because you think somebody is not following the rules and you feel like I should do something about that other than providing advice, really my role kind of generally speaking for the most part ends there. I also want you to feel very comfortable coming to me for advice. Again, as a reminder, I'm here to help. I'm not here to tell you that you've been bad and get you in trouble, right? It's the opposite. I'm here to help keep you out of trouble. So anytime you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll touch a little bit on open meetings law. Again, all of you are familiar at least somewhat with this topic, and the idea behind the open meetings law in Wisconsin and many other states have similar provisions is that the public needs to have access to government business, right, and how it's done. And so that means that meetings have to be noticed and they have to be accessible. Accessible meaning people are actually able to attend and they can watch and participate in observing how city business is done. Now, there are exceptions to that, and those are called closed sessions. Those exceptions are enumerated in the statutes, and they're fairly limited, and it has to, you know, if you want to have a closed session on a particular item, it really has to fit a specific statutory exception. Otherwise, that's not something we can do. Obviously, I think the public policy behind open meetings law is probably fairly clear for most. And as I mentioned, the idea is to really let the people who are being governed to have access to see how those who govern do it, right? So the idea is fairly simple. How applying it can sometimes be a little tricky. I do want to mention that open meetings law like public records law, do have to be interpreted broadly to promote the policy of openness. And generally speaking, when there's a close call, courts do generally tend to favor open government versus closed. We don't really want this isn't an area of the law where you can kind of get away on a technicality, if you will, using kind of lay terms, right? So we really need to be mindful of making sure that we follow open meetings requirements. It applies to meetings of governmental bodies, which of course this body is a governmental body. I think that's probably fairly obvious, but it's not only the council, it's also any committees that the council creates by ordinance or otherwise. Meetings also has a definition, and it means the convening of members of the governmental body for the purpose of exercising the responsibilities of that body. So in other words, there's a two-parts test. One is the purpose, in other words, what are you gathered for? If you're at a barbecue discussing, you know, a birthday party or a Packer win or whatever else you discuss on your free time when you're not gathering together and discussing city business, that doesn't automatically turn this into a meeting for the purposes of open meeting law. But if you're gathered regardless of the location, if you're gathered and you're talking about city business, then potentially it could be a meeting within that definition. And then we get to the second part, which is the numbers requirement. So you need to have a number of members present that is sufficient to determine the body's course of action. So I've touched on what the purpose already is. So it includes preliminary decisions, discussions, information gathering. You don't have to necessarily be voting on something for it to constitute governmental business. The quorum is probably the more challenging kind of area of this law because really the simple question, how many members constitutes a meeting? And the answer is, it depends, which is probably an answer you've heard from lawyers before. I'm very sorry. And I think to some extent you might get different answers from different attorneys. I know the city of Madison had a very strict interpretation of the quorum at one point, and with a different city attorney, I think they've kind of eased it back a little bit. But the big picture here is that if enough of you are gathered to make a decision or block a decision, then you've got the quorum. And so for most things, you might say, well, then that means 5 because that's how many votes you need. But remember, you all can gather with only 6 members. And so at that point, only 4 of you can potentially constitute a quorum. Additionally, where a supermajority is involved, a much smaller number can block, right? Only 3 alders could block a measure from passing because you might need 6 votes to pass. So in short, it depends. Generally speaking, 2 of you talking about a topic will almost never be a problem. Once you get to 3, potentially it could be, especially if it involves budget amendments. So what that means, it doesn't mean that you can't talk about things. It means that you need to talk about them during a meeting. There is some discussion in case law and in the Attorney General opinions about what really constitutes a convening of members. So in other words, if you're writing each other letters, it's probably separated over time enough that we don't generally consider that to be a meeting. Of course, I don't know how many of you have written each other letters recently or to anyone in the past. More likely, you might be emailing or making phone calls or having a text message conversation. These kind of simultaneous, very quick back and forth interactions likely do fall into the domain of a meeting, right? Because you're basically having a conversation. In other words, if it looks like a conversation, that's probably a meeting. If you're, corresponding over the course of an extended period of time, and each response is, a week apart, because that's how long it takes you to receive the letter and then send it back and for the recipient to receive that, probably not going to be considered a meeting. But just a reminder that you don't have to be in the same room in order for this, the provisions of the Open Meetings Law to be triggered. There's also this idea of a walking quorum. I'll touch on that briefly, but you probably all know. The idea is you can't play telephone, if you remember that game. Probably at some point you played that, right? So one of you can't call another and say, hey, let's do this thing. Do you agree? Yes, I do. Okay, well, I'll call Alder B or Alder C now and have this conversation. And then Alder C calls Alder D, has the exact same conversation. And we're sort of doing the same thing we do in the same room, except for one at a time. Obviously, that it can be very complex and fact-specific, but the short of it is that, remember this idea that courts interpret open meetings law in favor of openness. When it comes to notice requirements, really, for the most part, it isn't something that you have to worry about because our staff handles all of the public notices, but the couple of things that you should know about is that you need to be aware if you're planning to attend a meeting that isn't a meeting of the council, but that you don't necessarily usually attend. So in other words, for instance, if the four of you wanted to go to a plan commission meeting or a Dane County board meeting or something of that nature, potentially that could trigger notice requirements as well, depending on why you're going there. And so regularly scheduled meetings are noticed, but if you're planning to attend a meeting that isn't like the meeting of the body you're on, then, and especially have reason to believe other alders might be there, just contact staff so that we can help you figure out if a notice is necessary, and if so, we will handle it. It's not something you need to deal with, you just need to let us know. The other item that I should mention is that meeting discussion really needs to be limited to the items that are noticed on the agenda, because otherwise there really is that notice requirement isn't met. So the way that comes up, right, is usually if somebody comes and wants to make a public appearance on non-agenda items, that's fine if they want to come and tell you how they feel, but if you start getting back and forth with a resident and now you're gathering information and you're having a discussion on a topic, now we get into kind of a problem territory. So if something comes up during a meeting that you want to discuss, the appropriate next step would be to work to get that on the next agenda. So I hope that makes sense. So takeaways: limit discussion of city business to city meetings. Let staff know when you think you'll be attending an event with other members. Be mindful of quorum, negative quorum, walking quorum. Avoid reply all to emails that are council emails because you don't want to kind of turn that into a back and forth discussion. And then don't discuss items that are not on the agenda. Work with staff to get matters on the agenda when appropriate. So if you have any questions on open meetings, I'm happy to take those now or at any point, really. Otherwise, I can move on to the next riveting topic, which is public records.
Questions from the committee? Logan.
Yes, as Alder Jetzer whispered, of course I have questions. It's kind of my thing. Valerie, just to frame up my questions here, are we going to talk about conflicts of interest at a later point in this meeting?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I will save that for later. So for notices, and this is more of a suggestion, I was going to reach out to Chad, but it just kind of came up right now. When we get, when we get invites to ribbon cuttings or to other city events, groundbreakings, that type of thing, is that something that we could have staff get in the practice of like including an Outlook invite or something, so that way if we respond yes, that lets the organizer know that we're going, and that would help easier track and notice any potential quorum that would occur? Is that an administrative burden that would be difficult? I'm just trying to think of, there's been a couple times I can think of where we've like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to go to this thing or not, and then we all show up and they're like, oh, there's 4 of us here. And we're not talking about city business, but even the perception.
I think it depends on frequency, and I also think that, just looking at kind of the example that you cited, in so much as oftentimes it might be uncertain whether or not an alder is going to make it to an event, and it might be a last-minute ability to make it. I don't know as though we want to get in the business of trying to enforce a response to those, because I totally get that your schedules with your day-to-day professional lives, and then mixing in your personal lives, and then also your alder lives, could be quite challenging to actually make some of these events. So I guess my preference would be is to not do that, because I don't want to obligate a response, because the record, if you will, is only as good as the response that's provided.
We were invited to go to the neighborhood meeting on Monday, and it's you, me, and Donald. So do we need to put like a public notice that, because I don't know, I don't constitute quorum, isn't it? So the 2 of them are fine.
I mean,
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The
To the
budget,
2/3, yeah.
at which point the mayor doesn't vote.
Okay.
Just a tie is a loss on the measure. So yeah, and again, I do want to reiterate, and I can appreciate the perception absolutely, but I do want to reiterate that these notice requirements are really implicated when you're gathering for purposes of either discussing city business or gathering information for city business. It does not apply to just social events. So if you're at just a social event in the city of Fitchburg, even if other alders are going to be there, and there really isn't a need to post that, because there isn't an opportunity for the public to come and observe your interactions anyway. They're social in nature.
I guess just to quickly follow up, that was kind of where I was getting a little bit like over cautious on the city business part of things. Whereas if we're talking about a ribbon cutting for an apartment, or kind of talking about how this fits into our overall housing vision, is that treated differently than if, like, when 4 of us go to community night out and just run into each other? That's the birthday party, if you will. Would something where there's a general perception that we're discussing a broad topic but not a specific agenda item, is that, I guess, where's the line, as best as you can clarify it for me?
I can answer that, but I'm not sure if you like my answer. I would, even broad topics such as housing, as it applies to Fitchburg, would probably fall under city business. If you want to decide broad topics like generally, I don't know, the weather or the hailstorm, although I don't think Fitchburg got it. I'm on the east side of Madison, it was not good. As I mentioned, sporting events, local events that aren't Fitchburg local events, really, that falls into the territory of social. But once you start talking about housing needs for Fitchburg residents or things of that nature, I would keep that discussion during meetings. Again, because the idea is that even though it might be a casual conversation, it really does form the foundation of the deliberations that you all make as part of this process of governance. And so the public has a right to be present while you do it. The answer there isn't to notice that event. The answer is to have that conversation at a meeting instead.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question? This is maybe a question for the people that have been here a while. Do we ever agenda discussion topics that aren't a resolution? I feel like there are a number of times when I've been like, I wish we could just talk about this. And it seems like most council agendas are like very resolution focused.
We can and we have, and we certainly can do that. If we've done it, we did a couple years ago, not before your time. I can't remember what topic we were, but we just didn't really have time to add it to a committee of the whole schedule because of the amount of topics. So we did add it to council, and I don't think we've done it in the past year, but it is possible. If it's something that you're interested in, I'd encourage you to talk to the administrator about it. And I do think that's something that we should probably utilize on a regular basis, especially for discrete topics that you're talking about, a 10 to 20-minute conversation. And that might have a timely nature that wouldn't necessarily need to wait till committee of the whole. I feel like that would be a good fit for a city council meeting if we're getting into 30, 40-minute conversations. Saving it for committee of the whole, if appropriate, feels a little more, in my opinion, feels more in line. So yeah, but I think we can utilize that as a tool.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if it's in Valerie's presentation or maybe even mine. I mean, one of the primary purposes of a common council meeting is action, right? And it's not discussion other than what might be needed to form the basis for that action. And that typically the city has utilized its committee of the whole for those topics that require more information, more discussion in order to make those action-related decisions. But to Alder Gerhardt's point, if there's something that is going to be a 10 to 15-minute conversation, probably fine to go ahead and put on the council agenda. We just obviously try to be cognizant of everyone's time here on the dais, city staff, and then of course community members who might have an interest in that meeting, just to kind of be mindful of the length of those meetings.
And just to piggyback off of that, as Chad mentioned, the council really acts through either resolution or an ordinance, right? That's one or the other is required. But certainly you can have a discussion item. And I think we actually have done it, not exactly a discussion item, but when we've had like an update on the legal tax cases. At the end of that discussion, there really isn't action. Sometimes there is, if there's like a settlement proposal. But sometimes it's just a matter of, here's a discussion, here's an update. These are long cases. They're pending for a long time. The developments are slow, but they do happen. And so every so often we come to you and we kind of bring you that update. So that would be an example of that.
Other questions about open meetings? Valerie, you can continue.
Thank you. So the sibling of the open meeting law is the public records law. And that is a very similar kind of policy behind this set of laws. And its purpose is to shed light on workings of government and acts of public officers and employees. So much like the open meetings law, it's really generally construed in favor of disclosure. But of course, there are a number of exceptions. And then there's also what's called the balancing act that we do before we release records. The way that public records requests are handled is that a public record request is received. It goes to the records custodian. That authority begins to search for responsive records, and then we look at whether there's statutory or common law exemptions from disclosure and also apply the balancing test, and then we release the records, sometimes with redactions, in which case we explain the redactions. Sometimes we deny the request in part or in whole with an explanation of why it is denied, or sometimes we respond quite simply that no responsive records exist. Public records law does not require custodians of those records to create new records in response to request, but it does create an obligation to provide a response if those records do exist or advise the requester that they do not. So when we talk about what a record is, it's the definitions here on this presentation, but basically it's a fairly broad definition. It's documents, it's pictures, it's emails, it's video that's either created or is being kept by an authority. So things that are not a record are drafts, notes, and preliminary documents, published materials that are available for sale or at the library, purely personal property, and material with limited access rights such as copyrights, patents, or trade secrets. Things that are included in the definition of record are records that are not created by the authority but that are in our possession. Personal emails, texts, and calls are considered records based on case law, however, generally are not disclosed in a records request. But they are technically records, so that's a good reminder not to use your city email to do personal conversations, if you want to avoid that whole situation. Likewise, or conversely, I should say, business emails, city business emails that you, or texts or calls or documents on your personal accounts are also a record and are generally subject to disclosure. Data in a database, social media accounts, contractors' records, police body cam, dash cam video, all records. So you are all custodians of your own records. You're the custodian of your own records. I say this twice. I'll say it a third time. You're all custodians of your own records. And I say that because ultimately the responsibility lies with you to comply with a public records request if one is made. And that's a big responsibility. We make it fairly simple for you, provided that you use the city email address. So if you use your personal accounts to conduct city business, those records are something that you would be responsible for producing in the event there's a record request. If you use your city accounts, we have staff who can conduct the search and do the appropriate screening for any kind of exemptions or exceptions that would apply, do the balancing test, and provide the redacted information as well as a letter of explanation. So I would really encourage you to use your city email accounts. I know you probably heard me say this many times before. I'll say it again. We can't make you do that, and it's really not my intention to tell you must do this, but I really strongly recommend it. It will make your life simpler and easier. It will make staff's life simpler and easier. It will make everybody happier in the long term. So the content of the material determines whether something is a record, not kind of where it's recorded or how it's recorded or where it's stored. So it's kind of really the big takeaway. Again, kind of an example of a variety of things that are, in fact, records. Probably not much that's surprising on there. I will say public records law hasn't entirely caught up with kind of technology and all of the various modes of communication when it comes to like social media and things of that nature. But again, ultimately, the thing that I would really fall back on is that there's this intention to interpret these laws broadly. That means in favor of disclosure. So just be mindful of that as you use all of those modes of communication, again, when you're discussing city business. We've kind of talked a little bit about this already. But please, the best practice is for you to use city-issued email for city business and your personal email for personal business. Be careful in conducting business by text or social media, again, because it does implicate public records law and it can be very hard to retrieve that information, potentially. That's really pretty much all I have on public records, other than the same corny joke I tell, but it's not really a joke, which is dance like nobody's watching and email like one day your words will be read aloud in a room full of lawyers in a deposition. So I'm only partly joking. Whereas my grandfather used to say every joke is at least part joke. So, just be mindful of what you send. If you make a record, it could potentially be disclosed as part of a records request. So keep that in mind. Not all jokes translate well in email, especially if you're having an inside joke with somebody you're corresponding. A third party reads that, it may not come out the way you had intended. And keep in mind that a telephone does still exist. I know we don't probably talk as much as we used to because we have text, but you can pick up the phone and talk if you want to have kind of a private conversation and you don't want to create this record. You're always able to make that phone call. I'm not saying that that's something you have to always do as opposed to using email. You absolutely can, but you do also have the ability to do that. So that's pretty much what I've got for public records. Happy to take some more questions.
About public records. Logan.
Just to clarify, are we the custodians of our own records?
Yes. You are the custodians of your records.
Fourth time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I think you can continue on to the next section.
It's great power and great responsibility. So I just want to give credit. Really, most of this material comes from the open meetings and public records guides and presentations that the Wisconsin Department of Justice and Office of Open Government have created. To that end, there is an open meetings and a public records guide in your supporting document. I can also send it to you as a link, or you could just probably type it into a Google search, Open Meetings Guide, Wisconsin DOJ, or Public Records Guide, Wisconsin DOJ. I'll pull up the most recent version. I don't say that because I want you to consult that when you have questions. You should call me if you have questions. But if you're curious and you just really can't sleep and you want something really great to help you go to sleep, you're welcome to read that. So it's out there. It can be an interesting read, a little dry at times, but it's out there and it's a great resource. So with that, I'll move on to conflicts and talk a little bit about conflicts. Again, much like public records and open meetings, this is not intended to be like, and you leave this room knowing everything you need to know about conflicts, but I just want to flag some issues for you so that you know when maybe you should call me. So there are various sources of law for conflicts. There's state law that addresses your ethics obligations as public officials, and basically they say that you can't use your public position or your public office to obtain something of financial gain or something of substantial value for yourself, for your private benefit, for yourself, or for your immediate family, or for an organization with which you're associated with, which could generally means either you own a certain percentage of the stock, 10% of the stock, or you're a director or an officer that kind of owns or controls the organization. So in other words, if you're volunteering for a nonprofit, that's not an organization you're associated with for the purpose of this definition, right? You're associated with it, you volunteer there, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if you're on the board of that organization, that's different, right? So the translation here is really, you can't use your position to benefit yourself or your family or a company that you're kind of in control over, have a substantial enough control of. We also have Fitchburg ordinances that talk about some of your ethical and conflict obligations. Ordinance 14-31 talks about incompatible activities, and it talks about engaging in business that is incompatible with your official duties, and so don't do that. There's also an ordinance that talks about confidential information and not disclosing that. So that is Ordinance 14-33, and really the gist of it is that as part of this body, you may be in possession of information that is confidential, and you really shouldn't use it for private interest of yourself or others for that matter, right? So that really would probably most often come into play if you have information that is obtained in a closed session about either a financial deal the city is engaged in or potentially litigation or something else of that nature. So that information that you learn that the public isn't privy to, you shouldn't use it for your benefit or the benefit of others. We also have an ordinance on gifts and favors, and it mirrors or is based, I shouldn't say it mirrors, but it is based on kind of the same ideas in the state law, which is you can't accept gifts in your dealings with the city. So you can't, if people are giving you a gift because you're an alder, you should turn that gift down. And you shouldn't obtain anything of private benefit for yourself, your family, or your organization. So the gist of it really is that if you're at a ribbon cutting and everybody's getting a mug and the event is open to the public, that's fine. If you're at Costco and they're handing out samples, that's also fine. Because you're not getting that sample because you're an alder, right? No one's trying to curry your favor, and there isn't even a perception of that. Everybody's welcome to get samples. It turns out you can get several. I have kids, that's how I know. I'm not sure what the upper limit is, but it's up there. They're very cute, and they get a lot of samples. So ultimately, I think if you've been in this position long enough, you'll kind of develop that spidey sense, right? Something doesn't sit right. Should I really accept this gift? If you have any questions, contact me. I'm happy to chat with you about it and help you work through the analysis. We do have an ordinance that specifically authorizes the attendance a variety of events, including ribbon cuttings, grand openings, seminars, workshops, and conferences. By passing that ordinance, the council at the time essentially said, look, we declare that it's in the public interest for employees and public officials to attend those. And along that, we can accept food and beverages that are incidentally served at those events, along with small items such as cups and t-shirts of nominal value. What's nominal value? I don't know. Let's talk about that at some point. You know, I think it used to be maybe $5. Given inflation, maybe that number has changed. Again, if you have a question or a concern, come talk to me. So, Chapter 14 is in your materials. One thing I do want to mention, we didn't really talk about recusal, but if you do have a conflict of interest with a particular item on the agenda, the appropriate course of action would be to recuse yourself from that item. If you are recusing yourself from a particular item due to a conflict, then please abstain from discussion as well as voting in the item. In other words, really best practice is probably to just leave the room for that item. But if you are going to stay in the room, you should just look down and don't participate in any conversations until that item is voted upon or tabled or whatever the outcome is, and you move on to the next item.
In regards to recusals, shouldn't you actually state that you're recusing yourself?
Yes, correct.
On the official record?
Yes.
Okay.
That's, again, best practice is to state you're recusing yourself, and as I mentioned.
And then go sit in the
I'd
audience
recommend
or
you,
leave.
if I were you, I would probably leave the room, because I wouldn't want to give the perception that I'm even, with my presence, trying to influence an outcome, right? I mean, because there's such a thing as nonverbal communication, and so do you have to leave the room? I don't think that you do, but I think it probably makes the most sense. State that you're recusing yourself and leave and come back.
I think what I noticed, and we have an incident in one of the commission, is that they think because you recuse, it means like you are not voting, but they can participate. So that one is something like recuse is you cannot discuss, you cannot participate in the discussion, the conversation, and
Correct.
you don't vote. You get
Correct.
out. You know what I
Right.
mean?
If you just don't want to vote, that would be abstaining from a vote.
But I think this is something that we as a council member, if we are in one of those commission and we see that, we need to speak up. Okay? Because maybe the chair of the commission is a resident, they don't know all of this, but I think we need to be the one that say, you know what, if you're recusing yourself, please leave the room. You know what I mean? Something like that.
Absolutely.
And sorry, just one more question on the event of a recusal. Could you make a public comment?
As to why you're recusing yourself?
Or just like as a member of the public, not part of the discussion, but I'm thinking back to some other situations in the past where someone's like, well, I have something relevant to say to this, but I can't discuss it or vote on it. Could you recuse yourself from the conversation as a member of the committee, but then make a 3-minute public comment as a member of the public?
I think I would want to know more about the particulars of the conflict before I could answer that. But generally speaking, I would say that if you're recusing yourself because you have a conflict, then you probably should abstain.
Yeah, you
from
can't have
discussing
any interaction.
I
with
would
it.
say that's a categorical never, ever, but certainly I would lean that way without knowing any, in a hypothetical without specific facts.
Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. When it comes to gifts, sort of rule of thumb, if they're offered to you because of your position, then turn it down. If they're offered to you because they're just offered to you because of you're in a time and place where gifts are being offered and they're offered to the community at large, then it's not a concern. That's kind of rule of thumb. But again, these things can get kind of tricky and messy.
Can I ask you a question? Because I heard this from other mayors about gift. Suppose that you receive a T-shirt, okay? That is your size. No one else can use it. Okay? And you like the T-shirt.
Where did you receive the T-shirt?
What if you don't like the T-shirt?
But you know that you want to keep it. You want to keep it. I heard from other mayors that what they do is they pay for the T-shirt. They write a check to the city and say, okay, it costs $15. Here is the $15. I keep the T-shirt. Can I do that?
Potentially, I think that's one way to address it. But again, I'd like to get back. I mean, if we're specifically talking about T-shirts, I said, where did you get it? Because as I mentioned, we have this event attendance ordinance. So if you are at a ribbon cutting, grand opening, seminar, workshop, conference in Fitchburg, appreciation luncheon that is city business related, then you may accept items of nominal value such as cups and T-shirts. So in some situations, that may not apply, right? You might just be covered.
No, but in the case that doesn't apply.
But if in case it doesn't apply, I think the easiest thing to do would be to return the gift or decline it. The alternative option, I think, what you're suggesting, and I think that works, or certainly it's better than just taking the shirt, is to say, I will accept it on behalf of the city, and since no one else in the city wants it, I will take it. But again, I think that kind of potentially brings up the question of, well, what if somebody in the city does want it? I mean, how do we know that no one else in the city wants it? So it's certainly better than just taking the item. The easiest thing, generally speaking, would be to just decline it, if you believe that it presents a conflict or an unacceptable gift in the first place.
I am asking the question because it can happen. You know what I mean? So I need to know what I should do if I want to keep something. Can I write the check and pay it? You know what I mean? It's a book.
Well, and I guess the question becomes too, can you even return it once you already have it, right? So if you can't, if it's not feasible to decline it, then writing the check would be the best way to go.
Okay.
Because how do you return it? But in other examples, I think in the past we had this happen where one of our departments received gift cards. That was kind of recent. So that was, what do we do with those gift cards? Did we receive, and why did we receive them? And should we even accept them? And as I recall, I think we just ended up returning those.
Yes, they were returned.
In my case, that I sometimes receive some gift, I take it to the office and I'm going to leave it there when I leave. You know what I mean? Like it's part of the mayor office.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
exactly. So if we're good there, I can move on to the most riveting portion of tonight's presentation, and that is your informed consent of the existence of an ordinance that was passed a couple of years ago in response to an ABA rule, which basically said that attorneys could not, without consent from their client, engage in discussions on kind of listservs and professional forums if that discussion disclosed the identity of their client without their client's consent. So that makes sense in some situations. It does not make sense in the context of a city attorney because it's very clear when I'm on a league call with other city attorneys that I'm the city attorney for the city of Fitchburg. I don't have any other clients. So by the very virtue of me asking a question, it is very clear that my client is the city of Fitchburg because that is my only client. I do not engage in a practice of law outside of my job. And so in response to this ABA rule, the American Bar Association rule, a number of municipalities passed an ordinance like this, similar ordinances. Some municipalities passed resolutions, again, at the request of their city attorneys, because the League of Wisconsin Municipalities and other similar forums like that are a very useful tool to brainstorm ideas, discuss kind of emerging topics that many municipalities are dealing with. Lots of things are unique to Fitchburg, but many, many things are not, and many other communities are dealing with similar issues, and so it's a very useful tool. I very much appreciate being able to participate in that, and so I had asked the council a couple of years ago to approve this ordinance update, and because consent can only be informed, right? You can't consent passively, at least not in the context of attorney-client relationships. And because there's turnover on the council, maybe not every year, but certainly there could be, every year I include the slide here for you so that you're aware that this ordinance is out there. And should you, as a body, decide that you do not wish me to engage in that, you certainly have the ability to revoke that informed consent. I strongly urge you not to, but that's certainly within your right. So I just want to put it out there. The ordinance is there. I will not bore you by reading it. If you have any questions about that ordinance, certainly reach out to me and let me know. So I'll just touch on Robert's rules. Robert's rules are very useful for conducting meetings, and the City of Fitchburg did adopt the 10th edition of Robert's rules in our ordinance. the purpose of those rules is to run meetings efficiently and to protect the rights of the majority, the minority, and individual members, as well as absent members. It really also just creates an orderly process and a process that once you're familiar with, it really helps you kind of orient yourself to where you are in a meeting and what's happening next. And so it can help you kind of understand what's going on, as well as the public if they also become familiar with that process. There are some exceptions to Robert's rules specifically, and that is limits on debate, as well as that's in Ordinance 4-24. As you can see, debate rules are modified so that during Common Council debates on motions, alderpersons are able to speak to an issue each time they're recognized by the chairperson, but shall be limited to 5 minutes each time they're recognized, except annual budget, which is governed by separate rules. This rule is in our ordinances. I don't know that anyone times anyone. I'm sorry?
It's good to have it on the books in case.
But it's on the books. And I want to, and that brings up an excellent kind of side quest, if you will. As a reminder, you guys govern yourselves as a body, right? And so if one member believes that there's a matter that needs to be addressed, they can raise a point of order and request the mayor or the council president, depending on who's chairing the meeting, to address an issue. And so again, these rules are there to be your tools. I won't be there to tell you must limit this debate because our ordinance says so. But you certainly can and potentially should, right? So I will leave that to you. There are many resources for Robert's Rules. A few are in your materials. But again, the ultimate goals are to follow decorum, right? We want to have some decorum. These are government meetings. It's not a frat party. Nothing wrong with a frat party, but this is not what this is. And so we want to run these meetings kind of with the appropriate decorum. There's a process. Obviously, you want to wait to be recognized before you speak again so that both other alders and people in the community can understand what's happening. A reminder, and this is fortunately something I haven't had to kind of counsel you on in a few years, so I'm grateful for that. But just as a reminder, personal attacks are not appropriate. You are welcome to attack each other's ideas, but please don't attack each other's persons, either physically or verbally, right? So we don't need to engage in kind of verbal abuse of each other. Again, I'm glad to not have had this issue in recent years. It is something that has come up in the past. I'm hopeful we don't have to address that in the coming year. Here's a really handy spreadsheet that you probably can't really read, but I'll send you these materials, and I believe this is also actually in your materials that I put together as well, but it's the 20 most common motions and what their precedence is and whether supermajority is required and if it can be amended and etc. So it's a little cheat sheet. And with that, we have reached the end of this really long presentation.
Questions? Logan.
All right, these are my quick conflicts of interest and ethics questions that I had saved for before, or I should say tabled to use Robert's rules. So just wanted to get some clarification about the role of us as elected officials and on the committees and commissions on which we serve and outside groups that may be somewhat, advocacy oriented. So for example, I'm on the library board. Am I able to serve on the Friends of the Fitchburg Library? If I was on the Commission of Aging Well, could I serve on the Friends of the Fitchburg Senior Center? I guess those are kind of two examples that just come to mind immediately.
The answer is it depends, but I would not recommend it. And I can get into the why, and I'm happy to do that if you'd like.
I would like that, actually.
Yeah,
yes.
okay. So if you, and again, fact specific, because it really depends on what the role of that organization is. But if you're on the board of an organization that also enters into contractual relationships with the city, with advice from a particular commission, then that can really put you in a tough spot, right? Because you now have obligations to the entity, the nonprofit that you're on the board of, and you also have your obligations to the city. And they may very well be most of the time aligned, but they might not be. And if that happens, you're really in a bind. So it really can potentially set you up for a conflict of interest. I can appreciate that there may be, a lot of kind of beneficial overlap in those roles, but it can be problematic.
And then the follow-up question to that, and I think you alluded to this earlier, but who polices us? You said your role is not to police, if we were to commit an infraction in this way. So is it up to us then as a council to say, hey, Logan, you're on this and we are going to censure you unless you get off this Friends of the Library or something like that?
Right. So as I mentioned, you're kind of a self-policing body to some extent. That's not the only source of enforcement, but certainly the council as a whole has the authority to issue some sort of censure, potentially even removal of an alder for cause, right? But when it comes to violations of state law, public records law, open meetings law, ethical code for local public officials, that would be enforced either by the district attorney or the attorney general. So, and the way these things usually happen, and they don't happen a whole lot, but they do happen sometimes, is that somebody would file a complaint with one of those two entities, and then that complaint would either go nowhere or potentially be investigated and an action could be brought, or some informal education might be happening from either the attorney general's office or the DA's office.
Sorry, I have one more quick follow-up on that then. So to the point about for a process for which someone could request from, who's not on this body, could say, any member of the public could say, hey, I have a complaint against Logan because he's on both of these. Do we have a formalized process to do that? Or would that just be, they come to the council meetings, public comment for non-agenda items, and put that in front of us as a body at that point, or by email or what have you?
I think that's the most likely process. We don't have like a specific process for filing grievances against alders.
Hopefully we don't ever need them. But.
I will say other municipalities have had to deal with these kinds of issues, but fortunately we have not, at least not in my tenure here. And then as far as complaints to the Attorney General's office or DA's office, those are filed directly with those entities.
Thank you.
Other questions for Valerie? Just to clarify, and I did not realize this, you said that on the ordinance, for any city meeting, alders should not speak for more than 5 minutes at a time on an item. Is that what it is? I just want to clarify that, because it would have been useful to know that. In
Common Council debates on motions.
Common Council. I know, because that might have been a point of information.
Yeah, and it's no more than 2 times, right? We get to address something.
That's the budget.
Only the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there were times when maybe we could have cut someone off after a certain amount of time. I've seen 30 minutes.
There were some glances
times.
here when we.
Yeah. So this particular ordinance says during Common Council debates on motions.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily cut people off like right at 5 minutes, nor am I going to time anybody. But it would be good to know for reference.
Can I ask why we do the separate process for the budget? I've only been through it once, but we were all very much like, can I speak this time? Can this be one of my times? Is this one of my times I speak? If I answer this question, is it one of my times? And it was
Sure,
like,
you can take that. Although that predates you, but I bet you know the answer.
It does predate me, but it's designed to really keep the meetings moving along so that there's not a 6-hour meeting.
it's because we don't want to be Madison. Is that the
I'm
go
not
till
going
5
to
in
say
the
that.
morning?
I'll allow you to offer your thought process on that.
Tell
but,
you that there were some budget in the past where we have more than 70 amendments, and we need to go through all of them.
I can recall at least one that maybe ran until 1 or 2 a.m.
in the morning.
Yeah.
I can give you that one. That was July of 2021. My very first meeting as city administrator was a CIP that went until about 1 o'clock. So there might be 2 on record for that.
I will point out that in my past life as a reporter, that I remember sitting through a meeting from the Badger Herald for the city of Madison where it went until 1 a.m. and then had to adjourn and reconvene the next night to finish because they had gone so long. So 5 minutes is great as long as we get business done but are not here until past 1 a.m.
Yeah, I think I'm fully supportive of the 5 minutes. The speaking twice thing seemed like it was just causing a bunch of confusion, but maybe that's just a one time.
We could amend those rules. Like, there's no reason why we couldn't
5
change
minutes
that. If
cumulative or something like, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, of course, we do offer the Finance Committee meetings as well as the Committee of the Whole leading up to the budget, which does not have any limitations on the amount of time you can speak or number of times you can speak. Again, with the whole intent being, ask all the questions you want, have all the discussion you want. It is open to the public. It is televised, so that it is publicly accessible. But to actually keep the action associated meeting moving along is why those rules are generally implemented.
And it's usually at the end of a full council agenda.
Yeah.
So
sounds good.
Yeah.
And these rules were implemented by councils because of events leading up to those ordinances being adopted, I guess is the short answer.
Somebody has been through this before
and
elected to implement rules that they thought to avoid others from having to bear their pain, apparently.
Other questions? All right. Thank you so much, Valerie. Appreciate your time tonight. Chad, is there anything else that you would like to cover during this meeting?
Yes, let me grab that HDMI cable and we'll move on to my presentation. Thanks, Valerie. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Scott, we'll see if this is going to work.
I'm sorry, Scott, was your microphone on?
It's looking good, Scott. Okay, before I get started on my presentation, I do want to point out, I have a slide at this at the end, but there's a couple of things that Valerie was covering during her presentation. The League of Wisconsin Municipalities has a number of resources available on their website, and again, we'll briefly cover that towards the end of my presentation. But a couple of the items up here talk specifically to what Valerie was referring to: a pocket guide to Wisconsin's open meetings law, as well as a pocket guide to Wisconsin State Ethics Code, and pecuniary interest prohibitions are available here. And then I also, if anybody is interested, grab some of these pamphlets from the League. So You've Been Elected. I know many of you are in your multiple term here, but I think there could be some useful information, and a review may always be helpful. So if anybody wants any of this information, it's available after the meeting. So moving on to the presentation, you all do know who I am, thankfully. My contact information is listed there. And then, of course, you also, since you are all returning members of the Common Council, are familiar with Adam Sayre, our Deputy City Administrator, as well. And his contact information is listed. So tonight we'll talk about a number of things, and again, I'll try to keep this moving, but if you have questions, just feel free to ask them as we go along. There's no sense in waiting for the end of the presentation. Yeah.
So you had your contact information there. I'm just wondering, this came up because we got emailed about whether we want our phone numbers in the Dane County guide or whatever. Has the city ever considered assigning all of the elected officials of a city-specific phone number that could then be forwarded to our personal number without us giving out our actual personal phone numbers?
I don't know if we've ever considered that, but I could possibly see if there is any sort of cost associated with that, or if we would potentially have numbers available. I want to just kind of think through the logistics of it all.
My workplace has, so I've got a phone number and it just rings. If somebody calls it rings my cell phone.
Yeah, our phone system in the city does allow for that functionality. I just need to confirm, kind of the inner workings behind it. And again, if we have capacity as far as from phone lines available and those sorts of things.
Sure.
So yeah, let me jot a note and we'll take a look at that.
I'll second that request. I think that's a great idea.
All right. So what I want to cover this evening, again, is a department overview and staffing, department heads and staff, agenda information, city council meetings and resources, the role of the city council, all their conduct, committees, commissions, and boards, and then, of course, questions. But again, if you have questions as I work my way through this, feel free to just raise your hand and we'll take them. So just an overview of city staffing. The city has just under 200 full-time employees, and you can see the breakdown on this slide by department. And we have approximately 75 part-time or limited-term employees as well. So roughly the head count is generally right around 275 city employees when you count both full-time and either casual part-time, permanent part-time, or limited-term employees. When you look at the organizational structure, you can see that obviously the residents of Fitchburg are at the top of the organizational structure, which then they elect the mayor, common council, municipal judge. You can see that Valerie, the public safety chiefs, and I report to Mayor Arata Frada. And then you can see the remaining city staff and how they, the department heads break down and then report to either directly to me or to Adam.
Question on that,
Yeah.
Chad. I come from a time before there was a deputy administrator, and I have a habit of copying you on all of my emails. And some of those emails probably should go to Adam instead, or copy to Adam instead. Do you have guidance on, should we just look at the department chart and copy Adam on ones that he supervises the director of and copy ones on you and the others? Or do you want me to continue my practice of copying you on literally everything that I send?
Well, first and foremost, I know that Adam and I do appreciate being included in those emails just from an awareness standpoint, and I have a bit of information on that in the slide as well. But ultimately, if you want to just continue to copy me so you don't have to think about who reports to who, feel free to do that. Adam and I obviously communicate on a daily basis, and certainly I'm able to forward an email to him to make sure that he's in the loop. If you are familiar with the departments that report directly to Adam, which is listed here as the assessor, the city clerk, the communications department, IT, library, parks and rec, as well as the senior center, you can certainly just include him directly on that.
And has this changed with Jill's role and with the parks director?
Jill still reports to Adam, and yes, I do need to update my slide to reflect that Parks now reports to Public Works.
Public Works, okay.
Yep.
Perhaps we need a generic email called administrator@fitchburgwi.gov that includes whoever happens to be administrator and deputy administrator at the time.
Bill, you're hitting it out of the park with the suggestions here. I'll write that one down too.
All right, I guess I'm done for the day. I'm heading home.
If I could add on to that, one of the things that I was thinking of recently, and thank you, Alder Jetzer, for jogging this in my mind, was a similar all email for commissions and committees as well, so that we don't have to track, like if you're a member of the public and you want to email the Parks Commission members rather than having to track all their emails down individually, it'd be great to just have like what we have for council and mayor for Parks Commission at City of Fitchburg, or Transportation and Transit Commission at Fitchburg WI.
Excellent idea. I've rolled my own on those with contact lists, and it was tedious and laborious.
Which is also tedious and laborious for city staff. And I'll check to see, I know we have, there may be limitations again from a cost perspective with our Microsoft account, but I will certainly look at this, that suggestion as well and report back. Yep. Okay, ready to carry on? You only missed like 3 slides, Mayor Radafrada, so you're pretty good, and you'll still be stuck with the rest of it. 17 city departments. As I mentioned in the previous slide, 4 of those departments report directly to Mayor Arata Frada, that being police, fire, legal, and administration. 6 report to the city administrator, 7 report to the deputy city administrator, and then the municipal court function reports directly to the municipal judge. I do meet with the municipal court clerk on a regular basis just to get updates from him regarding municipal court related matters. And take any questions, comments, or other thoughts and concerns he may have as well. Department descriptions are available in the employee handbook on pages 11 through 13. The employee handbook is available on the city's website. The Fitch-Verona EMS district, as you know, serves both the cities of Fitchburg and Verona and the town of Verona, and we've been in that partnership with those two municipalities for about 50 years now. And as you know, we're continuously assessing our options there and about to embark on another assessment. We also participate in the multi-jurisdictional public safety information system that's oftentimes referred to as MPSIS with Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, Middleton, Monona, and Verona, although just recently Wanakee has now been added into that consortium. And that consortium was formed it's probably been close to 25 years ago now with originally Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, and Middleton as a collaborative arrangement to share costs associated with CAD, computer-aided dispatch, as well as our mobile software applications in our police vehicles, and to create resource sharing agreements where municipalities could share personnel resources or other resources in times of need with other municipalities. So that's been a very helpful arrangement. Over the last 25 years, there's probably been well over $1 million in grant funding that has been obtained to implement a number of projects there through that consortium. And certainly the fact that it is a consortium has been beneficial to those grant applications as well. And I think it's a testament that since its inception with the three larger municipalities, that three other additional municipalities here in Dane County have saw the benefits and look to join. Moving on to department heads and staff, they are all trained and experienced professionals in their field and responsible for carrying out the day-to-day operations of the city. I encourage you to contact department heads to learn about department operations, what's going well, what areas of improvement do they see, ask any operational questions or other considerations that you may wish to discuss with them. You can feel free to talk about existing processes and functions of the department. If you have any proposals for new programs or initiatives or new ordinances, I also certainly encourage you to contact the affected departments and just get their perspective on it, at least ideally prior to going ahead and proposing it at the Common Council level. Some departments have the ability to do ride-alongs, namely police, fire, and to some degree, our highway department can probably do that. I don't know, Mayor, if you've done a ride-along during snow plowing? No? The Logan did. I was going to say, I knew that one of you had done that recently. So
It's fantastic.
Yeah. There's a reason I'm not allowed to drive a snow plow, because there'd be a lot of claims, I can assure. Yeah.
The city attorney has left the room, for the record.
So we're devolving into frat party territory?
So obviously, department heads and staff act and recommend in the best interest of the city as a whole. And as we talked about earlier, Adam and I do certainly appreciate it when we are included in any email correspondence you have with staff. City council meetings are held the second and fourth Tuesday of the month at 6:30. Generally speaking, the first meeting in July and second meeting in December is not held. I don't know if Mayor Radefrada, if you're planning on canceling the first meeting in July for planning purposes. Yes, we are. And then another update for my slide. Committee of the Whole is the fourth Wednesday of the month at 6:30. A quorum of common council members equals 6 alders. And please notify the mayor, council president, city clerk, and or administrator if you're unable to attend a meeting or will be late. That is just helpful, particularly in situations where we need to ensure that a quorum is present, which is one of those, most often, those 2/3 votes that may need to come. The council meeting agenda and packet is available and posted to the city website on the Friday prior to the meeting. The agenda purpose is to provide a structure and to facilitate an efficient and effective use of meeting time. And it's also to satisfy the subject matter and notice requirements of Wisconsin open meetings law. If a subject is not on the agenda, it cannot be lawfully discussed or acted upon by the Common Council. I will say if there is an item that you want to discuss, perhaps somebody, a community member has appeared during the public appearances section where we talk about this a little bit later, where we don't allow interaction because it's not an agenda item. An alder is able to request that item be added to a future agenda for a council meeting or committee of the whole, simply working through the mayor to do that, and or obviously 2 alders can get that done. So in looking at the agenda packet, that contains all the information related to the agenda items. There's a referral sheet, which contains a brief overview and background of the agenda item, any supporting documents that might be helpful in conveying what specifically this is. That could be a permit or license application, development plans, contracts, staff memos, those sorts of things. There may or may not be a staff recommendation either on the referral sheet or within the supporting documents. And then, of course, there's the resolution, which is the actual direction given or action to be taken that the council is directing. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to this because, and obviously Jake's been on the council for a few months already, so we have a relatively experienced council at this point. But for future presentations, when we do have totally fresh, brand new council members, I think it's helpful to talk about the consent agenda and what that means, because I think the first time someone sees an agenda, they might think they have to be prepared to vote on every single thing. And like just looking at what the referral sheet function, where it says where it's going, what committees it's going to, when it's coming back to council. I think understanding how a referral sheet works, it might be worthwhile to put that like a screenshot of it and say, here's what you should take a look at when you're looking at the referral sheet to understand it. The consent agenda is just referring to committees, so take a look at when it's coming back, take a look at the committees it's being referred to. And then also the point being made that, number one, there are some things that are referred in the consent agenda that never come back to council. Primarily, those are pretty much only things that go to Plan Commission, conditional uses and architectural design reviews that are never reviewed by the council, but they're there for informational purposes. And so looking at the consent agenda, while you don't need to read every piece of the content, sometimes it's worthwhile to look through it in more depth because it's not going to come back. And if you care about the architectural design review for something and you want to comment on it as a council member, you need to come to the Plan Commission meeting or reach out to somebody by email. That I don't think is always pointed out in advance for alders. Also the finance reports, which we've just recently talked about how those have become a little more important in the fact that we're no longer referring certain things to council as a resolution anymore. And so reading through those finance reports, those that are referred out, we don't ever discuss them, but they are there for informational purposes and can be worthwhile to read through, even though they are not ever going to be discussed. And then I guess the last thing too, and this is, I guess it's a little embarrassing to admit, but I didn't realize that there was a Plan Commission memo for the first couple of years I was on council. I literally didn't know it existed. It was not included in the council packets at the time. And then when I was on Plan Commission, I was like, oh, there's this really important summary of information that the plan department puts together. So now those are included in the council documents, but given the complexity of Plan Commission items, I think specifically pointing out that after the referral sheet, there is a Plan Commission memo or a Plan Department memo. And if you don't see it, it exists and it just happened to be forgotten and it exists. I think that's really important as well because, and I might even suggest releasing the memo in its entirety in the consent agenda as well, because that might be an easier way for the public to digest it as well, because one of the complaints I hear is that people don't understand what's being happening in the city. And actually one of the easiest ways to do that, aside from maybe using our planning, GIS map that has planning documents in it, would be to read the plan memo on a regular basis. So a couple of suggestions there. I think most of you know that already, and if you don't, there you go. But I think that would be helpful to add for future meetings. Oh, you're not on.
I don't think that the memo for the plan, for Plan Commission is ready until for the consent agenda time, when we send the consent. It's already ready. When we receive it, like what? The 30th of Friday before Plan Commission meeting.
Yeah, I would put it maybe in the next packet. And we can talk about it.
Yeah.
That's just a suggestion. I feel like there's probably some things to be, but it would be like the second Tuesday of the a second council meeting of the month, which is after Plan Commission. Something to throw out there. But I understand that there's some complexities there. But yeah, those are the things that it took me a little while to learn.
Sure.
And pointing it out front would be helpful, I think, for new alders.
Yeah, all great suggestions, and the feedback is always helpful. I know that, as you pointed out, some of the suggestions that we've heard from you or that you've maybe heard from constituents, we try to assess each of those and look to add things and make those enhancements, and several of them have been done, again, with the intent to make sure that you guys have the information that you need and that it's also a bit more easily accessible to the public. So continue to offer those suggestions. It's definitely appreciated. As I mentioned briefly in an earlier statement, if you want to add something to agenda, the mayor is the one who has the easiest ability to add something to the agenda. You can work your way through the mayor. Otherwise, two alders can work to implement an agenda item. There could be a formal motion by council as well, if you want to choose that route. I don't know as though I've seen that in the time that I've been in this role where there's been, a formal motion to actually add something to the agenda. Typically, it doesn't get to that point, if you will, but that is also another option that's available. Agenda items, if you are looking to put something out there, please have those submitted to Tracy at 12 p.m. on Wednesday before the meeting. That is also the same deadline that city staff has to submit agenda items. And then again, feel free to contact the city administration and or department head for questions, assistance, or perspective. Consent agenda is largely focused on routine matters. That takes a single motion, seconded and adopted by a majority vote to approve, adopt all of the matters that are on the consent agenda. You may request removal of an item from the consent agenda to be separately discussed and acted upon if you so wish to do that. And based upon your suggestion, Alder Gerhard, I'll look to update this slide again as well. So referrals and direct referrals, the vast majority of items are referred for action at the next council meeting, as you know. So typically there's a referral that goes out at meeting 1 of the month. Oftentimes those go to committees, commissions, or boards for further consideration, and then they work their way back to Common Council, typically at the following meeting, but depending on when a committee, commission, or board meets, it may be another meeting or two before that item works its way back. As Alder Gerhard pointed out, oftentimes the best way to look at that is on the referral sheet. That'll identify the date of the committees that meeting or that item is being referred to and when it will be reporting back to Common Council. And I'll look to include kind of, a screenshot of a referral sheet in future presentations. Some items are done through direct referral. We work with the mayor to get those approved. We usually don't use direct referrals unless there's a time sensitivity or other reason that makes sense to move that item in the direct referral fashion. It does make for a bit more of an efficient process, obviously, since it doesn't take the 2 or more weeks to get something approved, but the city process is typically done, as I mentioned, through the standard referral. So we try to use this sparingly or only in those matters that are needed. Public comment on non-agenda items. Every Common Council meeting and Committee of the Whole has a section agended where the public can provide comments that are related to items not on the agenda. Those comments have typically been limited to 3 minutes. Which also generally applies to committees and commissions, although that is at the discretion of the chair, whether that be the mayor chairing the Common Council meetings or the committee commission chair. No discussion should occur with people making public comment. As we talked about, those items are not agended and therefore not eligible to be lawfully discussed. And if you have an interest in discussing a topic further, again, that topic should be added to an upcoming meeting, whether that's a Common Council meeting or Committee of the Whole.
I was just wondering if we could make some of these rules clear to members of the public before public comment begins. If we see there's no one in the chamber and no one online, we can skip it. But if we see or we have the form filled out, I think it would be helpful to maybe even have this slide available and just say, you have 3 minutes. You cannot, the council cannot respond, because I've seen situations here, and particularly in other communities I can think of, I think Sheboygan had this issue, where a person would go in front of the mic and say, how many alders up here have done their due diligence on this? And the body can't respond. And then they would post that clip on social media and say, see, they're not, they're all in cahoots and they're all doing all these things that are, out there. This is about the data center conversation for those who may be familiar. So I think making it clear to those in the room and in the recording of the meeting would be helpful to set a ground rule and framework, and also just eliminate some of the confusion for folks who are, want to ask questions of us. And it's not, we are not responding because we are not choosing not to engage. It is legally a barrier that we cannot cross.
Yeah, great suggestion. In the past, we have looked at trying to implement more of an electronic registration system that would be able to convey the procedure that's typically followed for those meetings. Unfortunately, cost prohibitions have been a barrier to implementing that, but it may make sense for us to just consider the more traditional avenues that are already available to us that don't cost any money to provide that information. So that's something else that we can look at as well.
Yeah, and to Alder Gerhardt's point, I think a lot of times what we do here is we get in our own bubbles of, we're talking about TIDs and TIFs and CIPs and all these acronyms we throw around, and we're used to it. But the person who's sitting in that chair where you're sitting, it may be the first time they've ever sat in this room or engaged in this space. So kind of providing that clarity, I think would be, especially on the nights when there are significant numbers of public comment, would be helpful to set ground rules so that people know what to expect, and also they know that they're being treated fairly across the board and no one's being singled out. That, we didn't say, well, you got 3 minutes, well, now you get 5 minutes. No, it's 3 minutes across the board.
Yeah.
And with the asterisk that the chair can change the rules under certain circumstances if they so choose.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I ask a similar question in that, and then we've heard from people before, mostly around contentious topics, that I'm a member of the public, why do I only get 3 minutes when the developer can sit up there and answer 1,500 questions and say whatever they want for as long as they want? Who is the developer in terms of a meeting situation and an agenda item? Are they a member of the public, or are they a different entity?
So if you're looking at a development situation as an example, we would consider the applicant for the project as the developer, and obviously they would typically have, some members, could be, multiple developer team or a member of their engineering firm or whatever the case may be that they're working with, may all be present and available to answer questions. So because of that being an action item and the fact that there may very well need to be a back and forth between the Common Council and those proposing that development, that's why there's no time limits placed on that. Otherwise, it would be pretty difficult to potentially get to where you need to go. I mean, kind of akin to the budget situation you were referring to earlier. Well, I don't get to speak twice for 5 minutes. We don't want to have that sort of limitation on that sort of situation, because then alternatively, could there be accusations that you're limiting discussion and therefore there's not enough information that's publicly available on a particular development? And then, of course, from a resident standpoint, there's a time limitation on there, again, to try to keep meetings moving. And also to encourage people to make their points, right? If there wasn't a time limit on there, then perhaps, they may not efficiently use their time to make their points. And then, of course, I mean, the chair of a meeting can, as we mentioned, alter the length that's available. And I know that that's happened if there's only been like one public comment on something that maybe they've been allowed to go a little longer than 3 minutes, for example. Or they can actually, stop the public comment at a certain period of time or length of time and or expect, the next commenters to share new information so that it's not just being rehashed what 10 other people have said in advance of them.
It actually occurs to me that perhaps there should be a discussion about creating like a written policy that the chair has here, and just like before we start public comment at the beginning of a meeting, when the first time we do it, we say, here's how public comment works. So everyone has a briefing, and maybe it's a slightly different for Plan Commission, when it's like the developer that is applying may make a public comment for 3 minutes, but then we'll also come back to answer questions. And
I ask, especially in public hearing, that when I call the developer, I say, this is the developer, so the developer usually, have more than 3 minutes. But, but you make that reference, it's like, yes, he's a developer, he's presenting the case to the Plan Commission, he should talk more than 3 minutes, you know what I mean?
I think it might be useful just to have like a policy that it's like, and we just read it and be like, yeah, this is repetitive, but here's how we do this so that nobody in the chamber is confused, because there's always somebody new.
Yeah, one idea that I was going to talk to staff about, and I don't know if it's feasible, but is actually adding that information under the public comment section of the agenda. So it would just automatically be auto-populated by on-base. So that's something I want to look into as well. So then any meeting could have that information added to it as part of that agenda item.
Oh, the other thing that I have encountered in meeting is that, they come to the microphone, speak the 3 minutes, go back, and then they want to come back. And then when you say no, because you already have your 3 minutes, they got mad. You know what I mean? So this is the other.
Yeah, I think that ends up being I think again that ends up to be at the discretion of the chair. I mean, I know that there have been situations where folks have, I want to talk on 3 different items, so I'm going to be up here for 9 minutes, and they'll come back 3 separate times, and that's their right, their prerogative. So,
and this is the section we're talking about here is public comment on non-agenda items. So if you could also discuss, and it may be the next slide, but the differences between public comments for non-agenda items versus public comments on agenda items.
Yeah, so we kind of transitioned into that a bit. I don't think on my next slide it's not on that. So yes, those who wish to speak are expected to register so that obviously the chair of the meeting knows who would like to speak and on which item they would like to speak if we're now moving to agenda items. And then typically, again, it varies at the discretion of the chair. Sometimes those who want to speak on an agenda item are speaking before the item is discussed in detail by the Common Council, or in the case of a development, before a developer presents. Other times, maybe the developer is provided the opportunity, again, at the discretion of the chair, to either present or at least be available for questions and comments from the Common Council. But ultimately, in that scenario, as you are alluding to, Alder Jetzer, I believe, somebody can register to speak on multiple topics that are agended.
Well, also, it says no discussion should occur, and that, if we're talking about non-agenda items, that's because we haven't noticed that particular topic. But if they're speaking on an item that is on the agenda, when is it appropriate or not to have any sort of a back and forth with a member of the public? Yeah,
there shouldn't be any back and forth between public commenters. And the reason being is it can deviate from the order of a meeting as far as like structure and order and efficiency, and then it also then begins to grade the area of how much time did I have. If there's a back and forth, am I now being afforded an opportunity to maybe work in more points? Those sorts of things, or talk longer. So I think we all can recognize also the possibility for those sorts of back and forth to become non-productive, maybe even result in personal attacks, typically, perhaps from a member of the public to the body or a specific individual. So that's why it would not be recommended in any situation to really engage in that conversation with public commenters.
Okay. Yeah.
There are cases where they have questions, but we cannot answer. But when we have the opportunity to discuss the resolution on the floor, maybe this is an opportunity to remember the question and then have a conversation among ourselves or respond to that person, the question. This is another way that you can participate indirectly.
Yeah, Mayor Radafrada offers a reasonable strategy that, if you have the same question, or maybe you didn't even think of that question that a public commenter is raising, you can turn around and ask that question of, say, a project applicant. Say, can you respond to this question?
In the interest of time, maybe we should go back to the presentation. Thank you so much.
You bet. City Council resources, you all are issued a city email account. Feel free to contact IT with any questions, and any password resets have been automated using Office 365. You are encouraged to sign up for notifications on the city's website. Those include the ability to sign up for notices when agendas are posted, news releases, project information, and other alerts. Please feel free to use city staff as resources for background on certain things, again, perspective on proposals or initiatives, if you have questions from constituents, those sorts of things. There is the council handbook, which we will email out to you again as a friendly reminder. That is also a resource that is available.
Chad?
Yeah.
Just a note, that's going to need a little bit of an update because it has the old purchasing limits in it.
Thank you. Well, we'll update that before we email it out. Thank you for pointing that out. Bless you. And then I did mention that the League of Wisconsin Municipalities offers a number of resources and other training opportunities. I would encourage you to take a look at their website and see what they offer. I know Mayor Radafrada participates in a number of meetings and things with the league, and is also a board member. And then city staff participates in a number of things with the league. They have a monthly roundtable. They provide listservs with legislative updates and those sorts of things. So I would encourage you to take a look at what resources are out there. There is also a section on the city website for council resources. You'll see things like the council handbook out there. You'll see the committee and commission handbook that we provide. Staff contacts is out there. Capital improvement plan. Other documents such as union contracts, development-related matters or studies, and then, of course, the city attorney and city administrator orientation presentation in case you'd like to relive it again. Here's other information on the city website. As many of you know, I won't go through all of these things. We do try to add new things as they are coming out. So, for instance, the updated housing plan that was just approved will be added, and so forth. City government is covered under Chapter 4 of Fitchburg ordinances. Just talks about here in the specific sections as to what those particular sections relate to: quorum, powers of the common council, standing committees, and so forth. Chapter 6 of the Fitchburg ordinances pertains specifically to committees, commissions, and boards. And most committees, commissions, and boards are advisory to the common council and do not have the authority to pass any legislation, set policy, or direct staff. There is a staff contact assigned for each of these committees, commissions, and boards. Obviously, you are encouraged to speak with your staff contact for committees, commission, and boards that you are a member of for information on current activities or items. There was a little bit of shuffle up in the committee, commission, and board assignments. So again, feel free to reach out to the staff contact on that. And typically, we have the staff contacts reach out to their new members as well as an introduction. Alder role and conduct. Individually, your role lies with your vote, and independently, you lack authority. You must work as a group in order to pass legislation, create policy, or direct staff to do things. It is improper and could be in some cases potentially illegal to unilaterally try to order or direct staff to do something you want them to do, or to represent the city's interest or position when you are not authorized to do so. As I mentioned, you must work with your fellow alders to adopt rules, policies, resolutions, and set priorities at published and accessible public meetings. Your responsibility is significant. As you all know, you have been members of this board for some time now. You are making decisions on behalf of the residents of the city, and your decisions may impact the community for decades to come. You have a number of compliance-related areas to be aware of. Valerie has already covered those, and I will not go into those any further. Obviously, just as a reminder, one of the primary responsibilities is for all of us to act with respect. Disagreement and debate are healthy components of democracy, but respect for community members, city staff, and one another is critically important. Obviously, demeaning, sarcastic, telling others how to do something are not welcomed behaviors. They're not productive. They're not acceptable. Please do not involve staff in politically related matters. And also recognize that how you are interacting with one another, how you're interacting with community members and or staff can affect people's willingness to want to work for the city and or interact with the city or common council. Golden rule always applies: treat others as you would want to be treated. As I mentioned earlier, ride-alongs with city departments are encouraged. Please work with the department head of a department you wish to ride along with or learn more about their particular department. Feel free to reach out to the administration, city attorney, department heads regarding any questions you may have, looking for background or history. Also want to talk about how the city communicates. There is information behind Scott over there on the table that is always available when you're in the Common Council chambers to grab that may help in your interactions with constituents. We are always looking for ways to better engage with the community through our outreach efforts. We know that that is going to be an area of constant evolution and improvement. There's never an end goal, if you will, where our work is complete, and we're certainly open to suggestions. As I mentioned, the league resources that are available, and I, along with all the city staff, look forward to working with you as you serve our community. Questions?
A couple things I wanted to potentially add for future, and just to get on the record. It would be helpful, I think, for the council members to also be made aware of the Dane County Cities and Villages Association, since that's been such a valuable organization. And I would think one of the reasons that we've worked so well with Village of Oregon is the connections that we've made in organizations like that from both the staff perspective and the elected officials perspective. Also, memberships that the city has that we could utilize to attend events as a employee of the city. For example, Sustain Dane, City of Fitchburg has a membership. If you're a member of an organization that has a membership, you can attend events for free. Fitchburg Chamber, other items like that where there's an opportunity to attend and represent and learn about the community would be helpful to know what those are. I actually am not sure I'm aware of all of the memberships that we might have access to. And then a couple of other things that I think just getting oriented, and this is really for the brand new alders, and so this is relevant to Jake because he hasn't been through a full year with us yet. But number one, that we take 2 meetings. We typically take 2 meetings off a year. The second July meeting.
First July meeting
first
and
July
second
meeting.
December meeting.
The second December meeting. So I think saying that, just like so people have that on their radar and maybe can plan for it, plan a vacation for that around it. The second would be special meetings that we typically do. So that would be this organizational meeting, obviously. And then also the budget special meetings that happen. Obviously that date changes, but generally it's early October. And that while those aren't, while the organizational meeting is required, but the special meetings are important to come to if you care to learn about the budget. They should be, yeah. They're not required, but they are almost required. And then also just that there are 2 special processes that have a lot of involvement of the alders, one being the CIP process and one being the budget process, and maybe just showing the most recent schedule on the presentation like this and saying, here's what a typical schedule looks like. There is an amendment process that has very strict deadlines, and if you miss the 4 p.m. on a Tuesday deadline to submit your amendment, you don't get your amendment in. Just pointing out those things that as a first-time alder, you might not be fully aware of, and that having a heads up at this point would be helpful. And yes, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. Also, the resources that the council is provided, so a key fob to access the city, business cards and name tag, that can be expected as well, and on top of obviously having a city-issued email. I think that's pretty comprehensive. And having this presentation, and I will say that the council resource page is amazing. It has a great list of resources, so if you haven't seen it, it's really, really well done. But we should add the new things like the new housing plan, the urban forestry plan, some of those new things that have come up in the last sustainability plan, I don't think is on here. Those recent things to update those as we go on a rolling basis.
I want to tell you, when you do some search in our website, okay, so you know what I want to say.
I have no idea.
You're limited to 5 minutes, Madam Mayor.
Yes, it can be difficult to find some things on our city website, and as you may recall, the CIP did have some funding in it for 2026 that will allow for a potential rebuild of the city's website. So we're currently discussing that internally, staff capacity and the timeline in which we might be able to begin that project. So we'll probably be looking for some feedback as we look to really rebuild the site and start from scratch. I think there's a lot of things that probably won't be transferred to the new site. So it's just kind of gotten...
you find some information from 10 years ago.
It just kind of lives there and doesn't necessarily get updated. It's like it takes on its own life.
Any other questions for or
Can
comments
I
for
mention
Chad?
something
Yes,
to the
ma'am.
council member? It's like we are already started with the CIP process. One of the things that I started doing since I became mayor is I like to have a meeting with the 2 alders of each district when, the CIP. When I went through the CIP process with the staff, so we have the first draft. I am open to that. You want to meet with me, and I can show you where the thing that we are coming, so you have an idea, like a prep for when the meeting is coming. So I am open. I have done that. Some council members take the opportunity to meet with me, and I do that during the budget process too, because in the budget it's an opportunity where the mayor, sometimes set up some priorities and also want to see if you have any projects that you want to include in the CIP, how you're planning to incorporate the funding source, guide you so that one is going to come after I finish. So I do that. So if you are, you're welcome to take that. So that's it.
Other comments, questions? All right. Thank you so much, Chad. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for the suggestions.
It improves every year, and this is great because when I started, there was nothing like this, literally at all.
When I started, there was nothing like this.
Yeah, so it's really great that we've come a long way.
When I started in this role in 2021, there was nothing.
Yeah, thank you for your hard work on this because it really has come
it's a team
a long
effort.
way.
I mean, between city staff and then involvement from you guys and offering suggestions, it's definitely a team effort. So thank you.
All right.
And
So-
making suggestions means it's not the same presentation every year, so it's more
It's
exciting
always
for
new.
those who've been here longer as well.
All
There
right.
you go. And by the time I add all those things in there, it'll be a longer meeting for you guys.
Oops. All right, we are at the end of our agenda items. Next is announcements. Our next committee of the whole meeting will be May 27th, 2026, and I will take a motion to adjourn.
Before we do that, do we have a topic for the May agenda?
We do not yet.
Okay, thank you. Then I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:14 p.m. Thank you so much.